One, it emasculated men, and most people don't like to hear that term. But the fact is our feminist movement has done nothing but emasculate men. God called them to be in a warrior role, one that is the head of the household, ideally making the income. While we are probably the more nurturing, they're called to be the ones that are the gatherers and the supporters.
Women are currently being erased in culture, and I want to amplify their voices and share their stories. Hey everyone, welcome back to This is a Woman podcast. Get your tissues out for this episode. My goodness. The guest on this episode is Cary Wilcox, and she's become a dear friend of mine over the past 2 years, getting to know her through work and different events. And she is the director of Sierra Pregnancy and Health. So Sierra Pregnancy and Health is a pregnancy center. It's a medically licensed clinic licensed by the state of California, and they provide free services to women and families in need. And we talk all about her testimony and the story from feminism to Christianity. It is so good. So with that, we'll dive right in. Well, hello, Cary, and welcome to This is a Woman podcast. We're so excited to have you as our guest this week.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So I'm so excited. We've been able to get to know each other over the past probably 2 years now at different conferences, Zoom calls, and all of that. And I'm caught up on what you're doing now in life, but I don't know your testimony fully of how you got here. The guests have already heard it's a little bit about being a feminist turned Christianity. And, right now the word feminist, I would love to be like, yeah, I'm a feminist, I'm for women, but society has really tanked what that word truly means, has made it to be a feminist is somehow to be anti-man, to be a feminist is to be against what's best, honestly, for a woman and how God created us and designed us. So with that, I would just love for you to kind of share your story about feminist to Christian.
It's funny. I sometimes will call myself a Christian feminist, but I think you're so right. The word feminist has been tainted, and it feels like anti-woman or anti-man. It's really anti-anything that God called us to be, and so it just was kind of intriguing. So I've been pro-life since the age of 31, but prior to that, I was not raised in a Christian home, although I had connections to being able to go to church, Easter and Christmas time. But I wasn't raised in a Christian home. My parents were, I'm going to say, pretty progressive. That was at the time in the late 60s, early 70s, where I didn't have curfews. I have very loose parents. There was some moral parts of me that wanted to make sure that I was the good girl. I was always, still am, a recovering perfectionist. And so I always wanted to be the good girl. And that worked until I was I was introduced to Jesus at the age of 13. My parents divorced at the age of 10. And I remember being actually grateful for that because they fought all the time. And I thought, I never want to have to be in a marriage where all that happens is arguing. So I was thankfully at the age of 10 that they were divorcing. But with that brought a lot of tumultuous feelings and emotions. And so I got introduced into a religion at the age of 13 and was baptized and knew Jesus Christ. But by the age of 16, the world had changed. We had feminism was hot and heavy out in our culture. A woman could be whatever she wanted to be. The church really didn't make sense to me at the time. Plus, I still had divorced parents, so I was a lot on my own, very independent, and had decided at about that time that I was going to walk away from the church that I knew, and then I was going to become this independent, strong woman. Because at that age of 75, in 1975, at the age of 15, 16, I knew, we were told that women could be whoever they wanted to be. And I did not want to be a mom at the time. I wanted to be that career woman that was just going to plow through and do nothing but make work my everything. I was driven, which now I can see was part of my broken story, but at the time, that was where I was headed. And that all worked well and good until at the age of 17, I found myself in an unplanned pregnancy. And there were no pregnancy centers like I work at now. There were no pregnancy centers to walk me through what I was navigating, but there was Planned Parenthood. And at the time, Planned Parenthood made it super easy to have an abortion and even made it sound like it was the right thing to do. It would empower me to keep on my career goals. It would help me handle a problem that I was dealing with at the time. Because at the time, that pregnancy was a problem in the career path that I had. And at the time, feminism was almost like it wasn't the ability to do both, like we try to help our moms understand today. It was really that, why do you want to have children when you can be a career woman and break that glass ceiling? So I had the abortion at the age of 17, and in the beginning, thought that it was a problem that was solved. But little did I know that it altered the entire course of my young 20s until my 30s. And by way of that, I mean, at that point, I started having anger and I started being so driven in my career that nothing would stop me. And so there wasn't a kindness about me. I was driven. Um, I became promiscuous and used recreational drugs. Everything that I had thought I knew what I wanted growing up suddenly changed. And the abortion was the catalyst that really changed my life. So, kind of enter into that time period, and then I get married, have a child, have a second child, and then start to realize, oh, I'm really not for abortion, but I really didn't know how to wrestle with that because I had still recognized I'd had the abortion. And so at the age of 31, 2 children and a husband, um, I had actually divorced my first husband and had 2 children as a single mom, and met my current husband, and we both dedicated our lives to Christ at that moment. And my story is interesting because at the point of becoming a Christian, I dedicated my life to Christ and became pro-life at that point, but didn't know how to even still walk through healing. So I'm still a very wounded soul, and I began to do for God. So I got involved in a local pregnancy center. Someone roped me into an event that they were doing, and then I started running their events. So I started checking off all the boxes for God, to help prove that the abortion was really not that bad, because I was doing things for Him. And then from there, I was with them for about 3 years, and then got on the board of Sierra Pregnancy and Health. And about that time, my husband and I had been married. We had our third child, and I felt God telling me that I needed to tell my 3 daughters, because now I'm in this space of, I was hardcore feminist. Now I've accepted Christ, and now I'm in this dichotomy of, still had a really good career in the corporate world, had 3 children, wanted to be the perfect wife, the perfect mom, the perfect Christian, all the things. So I still was in that space of trying to prove myself while being a Christian woman. And I think that that's where a lot of Christian women right now are struggling. For those of us that have careers and are Christian and know what God's word says about our abilities, and we're really called to be nurturers, it's very hard to sometimes think, how can I nurture my family and nurture my career? What comes first? Even though we know God's supposed to come first, I still found myself putting my career first, even though I was still a very good mom. So about that time, the Lord was telling me I needed to tell my 3 daughters about my abortion. There had been an incident that happened with one of my daughters, and it was just very clear that I needed to say something. And I was so worried that they were going to see me as a hypocrite, because up until this point, I'd been leading this Christian life and talking about morals and talking about, well, that was back in the purity culture. So we're talking about purity and to stay pure until marriage, even though I had done nothing like that. So I was worried how they were going to see me as a mom and as a woman. And I finally told them, and I was met with nothing but unconditional love. which I am so grateful to, which is to me is what the Lord really does to us, right? He loves us unconditionally. So they did that, and it was about that time that I was asked to be the director for Sierra Pregnancy and Health here in Roseville, and I just fought with the Lord and said, no, I can't do that because I already knew how broken I was. Still had not gone through any kind of healing. Had left the corporate world, had felt called to retire from the corporate world, and it took about probably 4 weeks of just wrestling with this decision because I felt like a hypocrite. How could I even go in and be a director knowing what I had done? Because now I'd recognized what I had done, even though I still hadn't been healed yet. And my niece, who actually lives in Georgia, she had an unplanned pregnancy at the age of 14, and she placed that child for adoption. And it was because of a pregnancy center in Georgia that she went to that helped her make that decision. And at the time I was wrestling with my decision for Sierra, she started being an advocate for them at the center that actually helped her. So she ended up talking to me, and the Lord was showing me every door that He could that I was supposed to be here. And I just kept saying, no, I'm not going to do it. And finally, after she talked to me and told me what she was doing and working at the center, my oldest daughter, said, I don't know what else it's going to take for God to show you that you are ready. So fast forward to February 2019, at the age of 57, I walked through the doors of Sierra Pregnancy and Health, not as a board member, but as an executive director. And my very first assignment was to go through healing. So we use a program called Forgiven and Set Free. And when I had rededicated my life to Christ at 31, I knew I had been forgiven, but I'd never been set free of the shame that the enemy wants to heap on us for when we make a mistake. And so this program is a Bible study steeped deep in God's character and His Word. And at the end of those 9 weeks, I was not just forgiven, but I was set free from that decision that I made so long ago. And the rest, they say, is history. I'm here. But I think what I've still been wrestling with in all this time is that there are a lot of positions out in the workplace that call for women to be, we're called in ministry, just like this is a ministry position for me as much as it is a career position. What you're doing is a career working with California Family Council, but you're also in ministry at the same time. And so there still is this tug and pull of being a Christian woman and wanting to follow God and submit to all the things we're supposed to submit to. And yet there's still this innate ability and desire to want to fulfill what God has called us to. And I still struggle with that. I still find myself trying to balance that Christian wife and woman with the career Cary and the mom Cary and the CC Cary, which is my grandma name, in this culture. And like you said earlier, the word feminist isn't associated with a Christian anymore. So I would have said up until a little bit ago that I'm a Christian feminist, but I can't say that anymore because it's a tainted word nowadays.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing your story. I mean, where to even start? Again, just thank you for being so open and honest in your story. I mean, how powerful to see how like God has worked through that and used you and what you're doing now. I guess my mind just went to how harmful society is to women by spreading that lie that you can either be a mother or you can be a successful career person, and that one is somehow more important than the other, one is looked at better than the other, and that you're not able to do both. I mean, that small lie, I mean, look what it can lead into, of the fear of the I can't have this baby because it's going to ruin my life. I mean, that's what that's what we're lied to about all the time. And like you said, I love that you're open and honest about, I'm still figuring it out. I'm still figuring out how to be a mom and a grandma and then do my job, because I think that's something a lot of women struggle with and aren't necessarily open and honest about it, especially Christian women. Especially with social media nowadays, it's so easy to look like, hey, I have this great job and I'm also being a great mom and I'm doing all the things. And I don't think, I really think it's nearly impossible for any woman to feel like I've done 100% in what I've wanted to do in my career and 100% of how I've wanted to be a mother. I mean, at the end of the day, I think, but the beautiful thing is we have God, and that's where we can say, I'm, I'm not going to be able to be perfect here on earth and everything I want to be perfect in. And God has that grace and that understanding, and we could have that hope in Him that He's planning things and putting together things how He is. Um, I just also wanted to touch too on like sharing and communicating that with your daughters, what you had gone through. I think that's, I think there's a lot of things that moms, once they get a little bit older, they have kids, they become mothers, they don't want their daughters to repeat the same mistakes or feel lost in the same mistakes. But there is that shame of, how do I tell my daughter I went through this? Could you give a little bit more advice, I guess, to any of the moms that are listening about how to have conversations like that with their daughters, whether it was drugs or partying or whatever the thing was, but how to go about conversations like that?
Wow. Uh, I had to pray. I had to pray a lot. I had to ask God to provide the correct opportunity. I did not tell them all at the same time. I told one daughter specifically in a very unique setting where there was, we were actually more out in the open because I was afraid she was going to, her response was going to be a little different than the other two. And so I wanted to make sure that I was protected at the same time. So hers was a little different. And then the other two, we were literally driving in the car, and I figured that was the easiest way I could do it while they're like hostages, and we had an hour and a half drive to go to San Francisco. So, and I think honestly, all I can say is that God just prepared my heart. He prepared my words, and they might have asked a few questions after, but really whatever I shared, I gave them enough for them to know that my life took some turns and that I still was a strong mom and a woman of influence and a strong wife and a strong Christian. And so they could see that. And I do think that I still worried that because they saw me as this person who still turned out okay, are they still going to then want to still dally in that same type of behavior? Um, and so I worried about that, but then I realized God only gave me the opportunity to help raise them. They still have to become responsible for making their own choices. So I've opened up lines for them to be able to talk to me about anything. But they were also much older. They were not younger. In their younger days, we did a program called Growing Kids God's Way. And so they had known all those pieces. But this was when they were probably 20, 18, 20, and 23 that I told them. And some of them had already made some choices. But if not, I think more than anything, they just really appreciated that I opened up. And maybe they had known some of it. I don't know. But it also gave me the confidence to be able to share more about it publicly. It was the catalyst that I needed to be able to help other women. Now I have the ability, and I'm blessed with the opportunity to host Forgiven and Set Free for groups through our church. And that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't told them, because it would have become known in a different way. I wouldn't have wanted that. So I think that's a piece of it. I want to circle back, though, really quick on the feminist side, because I think one of the things that I've pondered a lot is this whole discussion of the transitioning movement, the gender ideology. And here the idea of the feminist movement was to make women feel empowered and strong, like we could do anything, which we know with God we can. But I think that the society at the time was trying to say that we didn't have to be that 50s model housewife that just stayed at home or taught school. We were able to do anything else and break the glass ceiling, which was empowering, but it also did two other things. One, it emasculated men, and most people don't like to hear that term, but the fact is our feminist movement has done nothing but emasculate men. God called them to be in a warrior role, one that is the head of the household, ideally making the income. While we are probably the more nurturing, they're called to be the ones that are the gatherers and the supporters. We're in a different support role. And I think that we have emasculated men to the point where um, we don't have any problem making a ton more money than men. And if they can't make it, that's their problem, instead of really coming about it through God's eyes. That's one piece. The other thing is, with all this gender ideology, we've now actually hurt any type of feminism, because we've actually now said women are less than, because now men who are bodily men can go into a women's locker room like a woman. And that's just wrong. And so it's totally shifted the narrative of what feminism was originally meant to be. Although I think we took feminism way too far back in the 70s and early 80s. But I think those are the two things that I struggle with right now. Is I don't. In fact, I had a conversation with one of my daughters the other day, and I told her I was going to be on this podcast and talking about being feminist turning into a Christian feminist, and her face just shot up. But it was more like, you're going to talk about feminism, as if I even knew what that was. And she's a millennial. And so I just think that to your point, social media and society has changed what this looks like now. And even my original idea of being a feminist, of being an empowered, equipped, strong woman, is not even, I can't even say I'm feminist anymore. I don't need to. I'm a strong Christian woman, and God gifted me with a lot of abilities, and I hope I'm just managing them to the best of my ability.
I love that. That line you just said is so powerful. It's like you said, especially for Christian women. I mean, we should be shouting that we're daughters of Christ, not feminists in this world. And there was a point where being a feminist was a good thing and it meant good things. But like you said, I mean, nowadays to be a feminist and what society has turned it into is to be anti-men. And that's something, even with this podcast, like I try to make very clear, like I am so pro women, and like women are lied to. I want a place with truth. Like women are being erased. I want a place to share their stories. But that does not mean I'm anti-men at all. I mean, we are equal, but we are different. And I think that's why men and women coming together in a union of marriage is a beautiful thing, because we have these differences that we use together to have a home, to raise a family, to do all those things. So I think that's so key that feminist has turned into being anti-man. I mean, I hear stories all the time of young guys that don't even want to hold the door open for women, not because they don't want to, but because they're going to be yelled at. I can do it myself. And I think that's a prime example of what feminism has turned into. Instead of just letting our femininity flourish, and letting masculinity flourish, we've turned them against each other. That's so powerful that you can say, like, no, at the end of the day, I'm a strong Christian woman. And I mean, women are strong, and the things we have to go through and the things we have to do to raise a family, to be there for people. There's a lot and that women do and are better at than men, and vice versa.
Right. Yeah, no offense, I don't ever want to change the oil on a car. I
Yeah.
don't want to change a tire. I mean, I tell that to my husband all the time. No, that's not my job. That's, we laugh because I take care of the inside and he takes care of the outside. And so any outside duties, that's his job. And that's a little more stereotypical for me, probably because of how I grew up. But at the same time, I really don't want to, I don't want to overlap the roles so much that we forget who we are and who God really called us to be. Um, I just think that's hard. I also think it's hurt us in the church, because I think the church, this is my opinion, I think the church has become divisive on the topic of women in ministry. And I'm not, ideally, I'm not for a woman president or a woman vice president. Like in a big fat Greek wedding, I feel like we have the opportunity to turn the necks of the heads of those that we're with, because that's how God gifted us. But our role isn't to be in that head position. That is what God called man to be. So, in the case of ministry, I'm really not pro a woman being the head, um, the top pastor, the senior pastor. I think a woman has a role in ministry. I think we are called to help other women rise up as God's women and do the roles we're called to, and wrestle with it all together. Um, so I don't think we should have no platform, but I think we have to be careful about the platform that we choose, so that we're not emasculating the designed God roles that God gave to man even more so.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think there's different levels of leadership, especially within the church, that men have been called to. And it's very clear biblically that different levels of leadership are for men and men only. And like you said, that doesn't mean women don't have a role in ministry or don't have a voice somewhere, but there's certain places. And again, it has nothing to do with that. Saying that doesn't mean women are less than or men
Right.
are greater. It's just these different roles. When you were talking about that, it kind of reminded me of something more funny and lighthearted I heard the other day on this. But it was just like a lighthearted joke kind of on this topic about there's a reason God is a man, because he knows the path for our life, but he lets us take steps. If God was a woman, we'd be forced into every step we took. And I thought that was funny because I mean, not to be like, oh, like gender bias and gender roles and all that, but it's funny. It's true. I mean, we just work so differently, and so there's certain roles that women fit better in and men fit better in, and we, especially as Christians in this church, shouldn't disrupt the roles that God created. And we have seen that a little too much in church nowadays. But on that, I also want to touch into the healing process that you went through. And just to dive into, I love that you were like, I was forgiven, but I didn't have freedom. Let's see. So I think we have those differences, and those differences are necessary and important. But something else I wanted to touch on is when you were talking about your journey of forgiveness and freedom. And I think that's such an important part, something that isn't talked enough about in the church, and the church has failed on. I think we're starting to get a little bit better on, but the church has failed. And I don't mean like the church, like the capital C church. I mean churches and pastors have failed on is they don't talk about abortion in life. And the stats show that 1 in 4 women by the age of 45 have had an abortion. The stats also show about 60% are women that are regularly attending church. So that means they're at minimum going to church once a month. And that's because the church is silent on this issue. The church would rather shame a woman for being pregnant out of wedlock than help a woman that's pregnant out of wedlock. And again, not the capital C church, but just the church body, pastors, people not talking about it. And so I think there's a lot of Christian women that either in your situation have had an abortion and then came to being a Christian later, or are Christian while having their abortion. And whichever it is, that point once you're a Christian, you know we have a forgiving God. We know we have a graceful God and that he forgives. But it's that freedom part. It's that I think there's a lot of Christian women right now struggling that they know God forgives them for what they've done, but they don't have the freedom in it. Can you touch a little bit? I know it's a 9-week class and it's this long thing, but can you touch just a little bit on the difference between that forgiveness versus actual freedom in that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, one, all loss has really been disenfranchised. So I'm in my case, abortion, but whether it's a miscarriage or a stillbirth or a failed placed adoption or a failed adoption placement, those are all losses. And we, as a church body, do not really take the time to understand what that loss means to that person. It feels even harder with abortion because abortion is a choice.
Mhm.
Those with a miscarriage or stillbirth didn't choose to have that happen to them.
Mhm.
So those with us in abortion, it's even more disenfranchised. And I also want to say that one of the things that makes it even more interesting in the church body is that we're not just women having abortions, men also have abortion
Mhm.
experiences, and we have ignored that as well. And so I think just it pains me that there are so many churches that are not willing to understand the hurt that is going on in their congregation. Because as I shared, my abortion experience was just the beginning of a behavior and lifestyle that might not have ever happened had I not had that abortion. And I'm thinking about all the people with behaviors in churches that are broken. Our brokenness stems from something, and so many times that something, like you said, 1 in 4 is abortion. And the also statistic is that 50% of women who have one abortion will have a second abortion.
Mhm.
So it's even more, there's more likelihood in a church that there is a good number of congregants that have an abortion experience. And that's not even to talk about the fact that my daughters now have an abortion experience. My daughters now have a mom that they had not never known had an abortion. They have a loss. They have I assumed it was a brother, a loss of a brother. So it just starts to go so much bigger, and it is a topic that the enemy doesn't want to bring to light because it keeps everybody walking in that shame. In the 9-week class of Forgiven and Set Free, the first concept is to really understand and kind of break down the barriers that what an abortion loss means is that there's going to be grief, that there is grief in our story. We just haven't been given the freedom to really explore it because we feel the shame that we made that decision to murder our child. So that's really hard. The second, and every chapter layers on the next part of healing, but the most important one is really understanding the character of God
Mhm.
and who He truly is. And there's a lot of I am statements, there's a lot of who He is that we will go through because the more we understand who God is, the more that one, we can humbly put ourselves under Him and recognize that we're just humans. We're broken humans, and we need Him. And His character is such that He wants us in that space.
Mhm.
Uh, and then we walk through anger. We walk through sadness. We walk through the grief journey. We walk through our road to abortion and how did it happen. And usually, a decision for abortion isn't really going to vacuum very often. In my case, I was afraid to tell my parents. I was the good girl, remember? So because of that, I was not going to tell my parents that I was a bad girl and did this. Therefore, I excused it away that abortion was the right answer. So there are things that happen that cause us to justify the answer of abortion. And one of the chapters really talks about that is
Mhm.
what else was going on that gave you the idea that killing one of God's children, they don't really talk about it like that in the book, but we have to wrestle with the fact that we did.
Mhm.
Um, how did that come about? And so that is a part of the grief journey. And then as you get to the end, you accept. You have an acceptance. You go back and you repent again. You ask for God's forgiveness again. And this time, because you've learned of His character, the asking for forgiveness is received with acceptance. And by the way, there's a big term out there that happens all over the place right now in society, and it's we're supposed to forgive ourselves. We're not God, so we cannot forgive ourselves. The only one that can truly forgive us for something we've done to ourselves is the Lord. And so there's a fallacy, and when we get through probably to chapter 7, that we need to forgive ourselves, but that's not true. In the book, it's very clear that the only one who can forgive us is the Lord for that action. Um, so there's that. And then as we accept that forgiveness, now we really want to go back and think about that child. And it's a beautiful component of it because it's the hardest, I think, one of the harder parts. But you actually understand that you have a child. And for many of the women that I've walked through, some of them never had any other children. And so they think they're motherless until we talk about the fact that no, they are a mom their baby just isn't here. Yes, by way of our choice, but the baby is still in the arms of Jesus. And so there's an acceptance that happens, and through that acceptance and really understanding that we can actually name our child and really walk through the process of accepting that child, now we're free. We're free from all that burden that the enemy just heaped on us because we know God's character. We've received his forgiveness. Not just received it, but we've accepted his forgiveness. And we now know that with God that we can continue on this healing journey. And are there triggers? Yes. I will say sometimes there's triggers. I don't share my story in every audience, although it's going to be pretty public now. But because I don't want it also to be, I don't want it to be weaponized against me ever. And I'm extremely sorry for the choice I made. But I love how even in that bad choice, God has turned it and is using it for good, not only for me being executive director in a life-affirming pregnancy center, but the fact that he actually has now called me to help other women on this journey. And I've helped women that are in political positions. I've helped women in classes. And it's just amazing that he's using me at that level, because I would have said I was never going to do that. So that's kind of where I think the beauty of the healing comes from, is that God uses it all, 100% of it all, in some way, shape, or form. If not to just walk free from the shame, it's also that at some point God's going to use that story for someone else's need and to glorify his kingdom.
Oh, that's so powerful. It's just in case for those of you listening, if that didn't click, Cary is now running a life-affirming pregnancy center. I mean, I guess what is a pregnancy center, Cary? For those that are listening and are like, what do you mean a life-affirming pregnancy center? What is that? Let's dive right into that.
All right. Well, I'm executive director for Sierra Pregnancy and Health. We are a life-affirming pregnancy center. Means that we believe in the sanctity of life. We believe in the sanctity of marriage. We believe in the code of Christian conduct. We believe in biblical principles. Everything that there is set based on the foundation of who Jesus Christ is. But that does not mean that we don't help other women in any other circumstance. That just gives us the foundation we need so that we can be the hands and feet of Jesus as we're meeting women who are walking through similar circumstances. So yes, we are faith-based. Each of us have to agree to certain things, but when we are walking a woman, we want to. There's a couple things that we do. One, we help women in an unplanned, unsupported, or uninsured pregnancy. Besides doing STD testing and treatment, and ultrasounds and pregnancy tests, when she comes in, we want to be able to help her process what she's walking through. She may be scared. She may be like I was and afraid to tell her parents. So we want to be able to help her slow her decision making down. She may have heard that abortion is the easy way out, and we don't want to make the decision for her, but we need to give her options and help her get her education so she can make a decision for herself. So we will ask, one of the questions we ask on our intake is, who's her support system? Does she have any support? Sometimes it might be the father of the baby, but sometimes it might just be friends, and who knows what they're thinking. We ask her how many pregnancies she's had and how many live births so that we can understand her total loss history, not just abortions. And then we're also going to ask her what her faith is. Every time we meet with a woman, we're going to use whatever she put as her faith so that we can open a spiritual conversation and say, how is that faith wrestling with your decision making right now? What does that faith mean to you in the light of this unplanned pregnancy or unsupported pregnancy? Because we want her to start really thinking about how does that all come together. And in the case, we have most of our patients are Christian, state that they're Christian, and many times they might have felt so ashamed, like I did, that they just walked away from the Lord. So how do we start bridging that back so that they can understand that what they're walking through right now is hopelessness? How can we love on them in such a manner that they start to feel hope? Then we're going to have an ultrasound. So there's no reason to have an abortion if you don't have a viable pregnancy. So we're going to give her an ultrasound where we can check the viability, which is the heartbeat. We're going to make sure the pregnancy is in the right location. If the pregnancy is outside the uterus, her health is at risk. We need to get her into care immediately. And then we're going to find out the gestation of the baby so that she understands, if she chooses abortion, what she's eligible for. But also, we hope that through that process, she's going to see that there's a little heart beating up on the screen, and we can use the Doppler if we need to. We want her to experience and see life. She may still make a choice for an abortion, and when she is still adamant at that spot, we're going to say, we're not the decision maker here. We love you unconditionally, and if you make that choice, come back and see us, because we have a healing program. We have support afterwards. And many times they'll call us months later. We might not hear from them again, but they'll call us months later and want to get into our parenting program, or tell us that they chose life and maybe they need prayer now. And they'll text us prayer requests. We get them all the time. And even on our reviews, I think it's evident by the way that we have our reviews that we're not judgmental. Our job is to love her where she's at, let her know the education, have her have time to process her decision making, and then hopefully we want her to choose life. We know by way of our own experiences that when she chooses life, that's the best scenario. Mm-hmm. But like me, she may still make a choice for an abortion, and we still want her to know we're still here for her afterwards.
That's amazing. I think so many women, unfortunately, are ill-informed on the places they can go when they find themselves in a situation. I think, just so everyone's very clear on how this all works, a lot of women will go to Planned Parenthood because they say, I don't have the money to go somewhere. So are you guys charging for these services, or what does that look all like?
No, it's really interesting. First of all of our services are 100% free, including our parenting and incentive program, where we give away very large incentives like car seats and high chairs and pack and plays and cookware sets. All of that's free. We don't take any state or federal funding. But uniquely to us is Planned Parenthood is just a block away from where we sit. And if she goes to Planned Parenthood and wants a pregnancy test and ultrasound, but she's going to keep her baby, they will not see her. They will send her to us because they know that we offer free services. It's a one-way street. We never send anybody their way, by the way. But it's been interesting. And even of late, we've had more and more girls or women. We're seeing women older as well, but we've had many young women come in that went to Planned Parenthood first. Or sometimes they may think that they're calling Planned Parenthood and they ring us instead. So that's an inlet for us to just open conversation and say, you know what, you're not going to need to get seen. Come to us, we're free, we can get you in. So yeah, it's interesting. I do think that Planned Parenthood has certainly had the marketing tactics to give everyone the impression that they are the place to go to, but they are not for women having children. They don't profit off of that. We don't profit off of her decision at all. They do. So in that case, everything that we do is free, donor supported. We work closely with organizations like California Family Council, who actually help support us. I sit on a state coalition board called California Alliance of Pregnancy Care, and our job is to help the 60-plus pregnancy centers across the state of California to keep our standards as high as they can, because the government of California is so far against the work that we do, because we are saving lives. We are having women recognize that they can have a baby and a career if they want. They can choose to do both. I mean, that's the beauty of some of our services that we have. We'll also connect them with services out in the county. So we don't stop just here. We want to make sure that we give them wraparound services so that they have the support they need, because every single woman who walks in here, her story is a little unique and a little different. No one's the same.
Amazing. I also want to touch on, I just think this is a perfect opportunity for the truth to be told about pregnancy centers. And so something that I even myself see in social media or at different rallies, they have signs like this. And people have this misconception that pregnancy centers, a lot of them know that most pregnancy centers are Christian based. And so they think it's just these crazy Christian women that want to force you to keep your baby. And so we've already talked about how that's not the case at all. I love that you say, we're not going to tell people to go to Planned Parenthood, we're not going to direct people there, but you tell these women at the end of the day, you are making this choice, and if you go make that choice, we are here for you and ready for you to come back and receive healing. So I love that. But people just think it's like a bunch of random crazy women that are inside this office that are just saying these crazy things. And not all pregnancy centers are licensed, medical centers. From California, the ones that aren't, I've never once heard, within the past couple of years of being in this work, I've never once heard a non-medically licensed center lie that they are. They don't do that. So I want to clear the air on that. But for you and your center, when people like to say these are fake clinics, these are just, again, Christian women trying to pray you into having a baby, are you medically licensed? How does that look?
Yeah, we are licensed by the state of California as a community clinic. And we have our license prominently displayed in our patient lobby. What's interesting is every time we do tours, people cannot believe what a beautiful clinic it is for being free. There's a stereotype of a free clinic being white and sterile, and that's not us at all. But we also don't have purple flowers and butterflies. Because we are a medical clinic, all of our medical staff, they wear scrubs. We work off of a very sophisticated patient intake system. We do things, what we try to do, our level of standard is whatever we would see happen at a doctor's office, we want to make sure we're at that standard because we don't want to ever jeopardize our license. And we also don't do anything that is falsifying anything. That is probably the biggest stickler that we have on our medical side is that we want everything to be above reproach. That's the way we operate medically. It's the way we operate emotionally and spiritually with each of our staff and our patients. Even in the conversation side, if we sense that the spiritual conversation is really difficult for her, we'll ask her if we can pray for her. 99% of the time they say yes because they know what prayer can do. But if it is that difficult, we're not going to continue the gospel conversation. So we don't force the gospel conversation unless an opportunity presents itself. We don't force Bibles. We give beautiful Bibles that we spend money on to give to her. Our infinite foundation is to make sure that when she walks through those doors, she feels listened to, heard, seen, and worthy, and knows that she's valuable in her visit with us. And when she walks out of there, we want her to understand that her story matters, she matters, everything about her matters. It's interesting when I do tours, one of the things that I say is that when she walks in that door and she's taken many pregnancy tests at home, she knows she's pregnant, but she's not thinking about that baby when she walks into our doors. She's only thinking about what that baby has done to her future life. And so our job is to meet her right then where she's at and help her process what she's walking through before we ever even talk about the pregnancy or the ultrasound, because we need her to recognize that she matters. And then, only then, can she start to see the life of the baby as something that's not going to destroy her personhood or her womanhood.
I recently on this podcast, we had a guest on, Patrina Mosley, and she talked about Planned Parenthood and about truly how anti-women they are. We really dove into how Planned Parenthood treats women. And so I love hearing about the pregnancy center side and how at the end of the day, you're like, yes, do you want this woman to choose life? We want all women to choose life. But that woman comes in and you are treating her as that woman. You are seeing her as a woman. You are seeing her as a person. You are seeing her as a scared person in those moments, which I think is just so amazing. On that, we can maybe wrap up with this is just what we're seeing in society is women are being lied to, and under the guise of feminism, of abortion right now, it's go shout your abortion and how proud you are of it. Abortion is a woman's right. As someone that has now walked through women that have had abortions and helped through healing, as someone who has walked through it yourself, as someone who helps women coming in these unplanned pregnancies, and you get to watch some choose life and sometimes you watch some choose the opposite and then come back to you months later for healing. do you believe this is a woman's right? This is empowering to women? Or what have you seen the effects? And you shared the effects of how it led you to brokenness. Is
Right.
that a one-off, or is that what we're seeing in general?
I every woman in our that works in our center or volunteers here has a story of some type, a pregnancy story of some type. Several of us have past abortions. And what we know is that abortion impacts every single person that's involved in one. The baby, first and foremost, the mother carrying that child, and the father, whether they choose to see it or choose to delay how they look at that, it impacts them for their future. And we see hurt and we see anger. And many times when I see right down the street on every Wednesday, we have the pro-choicers with their big pink signs out. And I just think they're walking, they probably walked the path of an abortion or an abortion experience of someone, and they are still wrestling with that, but they don't know how to do anything else. And so they're shouting it in order to try to cover up the pain that is actually happening inside their body. So I think that every single woman and man that's experienced an abortion, there's pain there somewhere. And I think that the idea of being pro abortion is just to hide that pain. Because that's the other thing the world has taught us, especially as feminists. We were told that, we just have to pull up our big girl panties and just go forward. So it was like stuff everything, which is what I did, and then just keep moving forward. And that's what we see out there. These are women that think they're doing the right thing by pushing themselves forward in this pro-abortion stance, but they're really only adding more layers of hurt to their own self. They're in denial, and they're affecting future women that don't have the understanding yet that abortion is a lifelong impact to our emotional and physical and spiritual health. It's just hard. It's just hard. I usually I feel sorry. I think the other thing that strikes me is that these women that are pro-abortion, they weren't aborted. Mm-hmm. So what gives them the actual right to even be pro-abortion when their mother chose life? So there's this false narrative that they've chosen to take on, and I've seen it over and over again, even with friends that have that position, and I think they do think that it's a woman's choice. By law, it tends to be a woman's choice in our society today, but if we are really looking at it from the perspective of God and His creation, we don't have any choice. Mm-hmm. If God chose us to become pregnant, we need to abide by that, and we need to allow Him to be the ruler of our lives. And that's where we've gone wrong, is that we've let the world tell us what we should be doing and how we should be doing it, instead of letting the creator of the world be our guidepost.
Yes, I think you'll probably agree with me on this, Cary, but I think for so long, people, and they still think that the pro-life movement is just because we're just for the babies and for nothing else. And the longer I've been in this movement, oh my gosh, yes, am I completely for the babies, and do I want the unborn babies that are in their mother's womb to have the chance of life? Absolutely. But if anything, the more and more I've been involved in the pro-life movement, it's because I'm for the women, and just seeing those women that are scared and broken, and knowing that choosing pregnancy might not necessarily be the easiest thing, and there are people to come alongside and help them, but just knowing how much abortion does harm women and the lies we're told about that is just through the roof. Truly, it breaks my heart. I want to just open up as we wrap up here. I always love to end with like a final either piece of advice or something you want to share that we haven't touched on yet, or just something for all the women and girls listening today to take away from this.
Well, one, God placed women in a unique position and called us daughters of the King for a reason. We are worthy, we're valued, and the world doesn't want us to feel that, but that's who we are. And it is only through our lens of looking at how God sees us that we can understand our worthiness and our value. And when we have that, then we have a stronger ability to manage sexual self-control and manage our moral decisions, and understanding that we don't need a man or a boyfriend to make us valuable and worthy. We have that man, and that man is Jesus Christ. And so I think that's the thing that I would like every young girl to take away with, is that culture and the peer pressure is out there to say that you're nothing unless you have this kind of relationship, and that's not true. The relationship that we're called to have and are supposed to have until we find our husband or our spouse is the relationship with God. He's our ultimate father, our ultimate boyfriend. He's our ultimate one that we need by our side at all times. That's what I'd want to encourage. The other thing is that for those of you that find yourself in an unplanned pregnancy, it's really important to make sure you go to a pregnancy center that is going to treat you with dignity and honor and respect your wishes, but also be willing to share the hard truths of what you're walking through. And hopefully that center is going to be like Sierra Pregnancy and Health, and they're going to come alongside you in a way that is going to lift you up and offer you resources beyond the pregnancy test to walk with you through that pregnancy journey, through the parenting journey. And we are just getting ready to kick off a fatherhood program because we want the dads involved. So we're working on getting coaches here because that's just as important. The father of the baby has just as much responsibility and right to be a part of that parenting journey as the mom does. And the mom sometimes doesn't feel like she has the right to demand that, and she should and does, because she can't just do it alone. She can. So many of us women have proven that, and yet at the same time, that's not God's design. So I hope that women will, one, remember that you're valuable and loved, and two, remember that if you find yourself in an unplanned pregnancy, there are places that will walk alongside you. And if that person who is with you as the baby's father is willing to come alongside you, there are so many resources that can bring you together as parents, even if you don't stay together.
Yes, and if I can echo on that, if you are listening to the podcast and find yourself in an unplanned pregnancy, have a friend in an unplanned pregnancy, and don't know necessarily where to turn to, how to find a pregnancy center, how to trust that, please, please, please reach out, and I am more than happy to help connect you. I'm more than happy to call up Cary and be like, what do you think of centers in this area? We want to help get you connected to the places in need. And with that, you mentioned already, you don't take state money, federal money. You're a nonprofit business. You are not charging women that come in. It is all free. So that means you receive donations, and that's how we keep these pregnancy centers going. If people that are listening to the podcast today just have felt touched by your story and all the work you're doing, where can they go to make a donation to Sierra Pregnancy and Health?
Thank you so much. Sophia, they can go to hope.sierraph.org. That's hope.sierraph.org. Or they can text Choose Life to 55498. And thank you. Yes, we are completely 100% donor funded.
Amazing. So I will, if you're listening and you want to make that donation, check out the caption on the podcast or the caption on the YouTube video, and that information will be there. But Cary, thank you so much. I wish we were in person right now. I just want to give you like a hug and all that. But thank you so much for being on the podcast and for sharing your story. I just know this is going to impact so many.
Thank you so much, Sophia. I love everything you're doing. I just love the work you're doing. I wish I was on more of the, I'm so sad I'm not going to be here next week for the big thing that's going on. I'm so sad. I'm like, I wish I was here, but that's our California Directors Conference next week. Down San Luis Obispo. So anyway, I'm grateful for all of you at California Family Council, and I love working alongside you, and I can't wait to do more.
Yes, amazing. Well, thank you so much, Cary. And don't forget, go check out how to make a donation to Sierra Pregnancy and Health. Do that as soon as you're done listening to the podcast. We will catch you all next time.